When you came out, you were a stage actor, a New Yorker, and this was your second trip to Hollywood for Saboteur because Orson had you come out previously.
Came out with Orson in '39.
Yeah.
And it was the beginning of Orson's troubles, but it was before Citizen Kane.
Right.
Heart of Darkness. Came out to do The Heart of Darkness.
Right.
And we were here for 6 weeks, being paid, improving my tennis, nothing happening. And finally the studio said to Orson, no dice, we don't want to make it. And then they didn't, and it was made years later by Coppola.
Right.
You mentioned
Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, Apocalypse Now. So that was my experience in coming out here.
Right. Now, you mentioned Orson came out here, and that was the beginning of his troubles. And he and Houseman were together in the Mercury Theater. They came out here. Citizen Kane got made and released in '41. And you stayed very close to Houseman. What were, in your view, Orson's troubles where he and Houseman split up and then Orson's issues came? What in your view brought that all about?
I think that Orson's troubles, which were manifold in this town and later on, stem from the fact that he was a gigantic talent. In my view, the greatest talent we've ever had in the theater. Amazing what he could do in the theater. He would encompass you, so to speak. We had very good directors on Broadway, absolutely first-rate people like George S. Kaufman, George M. Cohan, and so on. But not until Orson came along did we have anyone in the theater on Broadway who could equal and even surpass the great European directors like Stanislavski, Otto Brahm, and so forth, who were total in the way they encompassed an audience. So with Orson, you would go to a play and the script had been changed quite a bit, particularly Shakespeare, and sound, lighting, music, the acting, everything totally encompassed the audience. And you were thrilled with his production of Julius Caesar. And he could handle comedy as he did. But when he came out here, and he made what some people consider the finest movie, although you cannot really designate any movie as the finest movie. But he made Citizen Kane. It's a pretty good job. But after he did Kane, then things, he did Magnificent Ambersons, and he never finished it, and Robert Wise finished it, and then he did the thing down in South America on the raft and all that. One guy drowned, and he never finished that. Houseman, who knew Orson better than anyone, and Orson did his best work with Houseman. You know, they did wonderful work before they came out here on the WPA, on the Federal Theater. Houseman said, unfortunately, Orson had difficulty finishing things. Well, he finished enough things to cause a stir. But you know, in this great talent, there was some strange remoteness, holding back. I know I did a couple of things with him, Caesar, Shoemaker's Holiday, and it was always a kind of tension with Orson. You couldn't spot what it was, but while rehearsals were a great joy, He kidded around at rehearsals, joked at rehearsals. When we were accused in doing Shoemaker's Holiday, the actors, the principals, accused of not being disciplined enough and raising hell a little bit on stage, one of the actors called for Orson to come down and discipline us. So one night we're doing the show and suddenly you feel moisture all over you and it smells like booze. You look around and Orson is standing in the wing with a bottle of Valentine's scotch, and as you come close to the wing, you get a splash of scotch. So you go around the other side, get another splash of scotch. This was the discipline. He was his own man, and he had these things of his greatness. He had greatness as a director. Now, as I said, I always had a little kind of tension with Orson. We disagreed on a couple of things, not radically. As a matter of fact, we resolved them. But you know, it was always that slight tension. And at the end, sort of, years after the Mercury, the Directors Guild did a whole week of 5 days devoted to Orson Welles' work in the theater, in the Federal Theater, in films, etc., and radio. And I was asked to attend with Kenneth Tynan, the critic, Orson's work, what Orson brought from the theater to films. And so we held forth on this subject. I personally thought it was a certain theatricality from the theater, a theatrical thing that he brought to films. And then it was over, the evening was over, and everyone shook hands, said goodbye, and so forth. And Orson saw me, and he embraced me in this great bear hug. And he whispered in my ear, "You son of a bitch." So that was the relationship.
Yeah. Back to Hitch. There came a time when Hitch had his TV show, and he asked you to direct, and it was a team of you, Joan Harrison, and Hitch. Talk a little bit about, because that show still in reruns, and when I say Alfred Hitchcock Presents, I'm including the Alfred Hitchcock Hour that you also produced, but that show had an incredible run. It's still being shown today, and it's still, when I see it on Meet TV or someplace, I'll stop and I'll go, I remember that one, and I'll sit there and watch it anyway, like The Jar, one of the great episodes that you directed. How did the Alfred Hitchcock TV experience work, the teamwork between the three of you?
It was originally put together by Lew Wasserman of then MCA.
Right.
And he got Hitch to agree to do it. And it was Lew Wasserman who got Hitch to agree to and suggested to Hitch that he put Joan Harrison on as his associate. They did that for 2 years. She was a brilliant woman, a marvelous producer, first rate in every respect. And they were doing this for 2 years. The whole show ran 10 years. They were doing this the first 2 years, and they were doing 39 half hours a season. It was just too much. So while they kept up that rate of production, it was decided that Joan needed an associate, and that they decided on me because of my relationship with Hitch, which had been very healthy on this picture saboteur. So I came on as associate to Joan, and it existed that way for about 5 years. The show was then expanded to an hour, at which point I was made a producer with Joan also producing. And then she married the superb writer of thrillers, Eric Ambler.
Right.
And she wanted to ease back a little bit. So Hitch made me the executive producer, and Joan just occasionally went in because she was had to deal with the cooking. Hitch's influence pervaded the entire show. The show had to have suspense and a twist, had to have a twist at the end. And those two elements dictated the kind of stories we bought. And thus we did a lot of, virtually all of Roald Dahl's stories, and Ray Bradbury, and Robert Bloch, and so on. The thing that Hitch wanted in those stories was to stay in the style of a Hitchcock story, which meant, as I said earlier, suspense and a twist. Occasionally, you could get him to agree to do another kind of story, but he resisted it, really. He wanted what I've described.